Yes. So, hello everyone. Today our discussion topic is DNS. So, today agenda is like that. First, we will look what is DNS. After that, we will check how DNS server will work, like how DNS query is working and how user get the response from DNS server. Then the last one is we will configure the DNS server. So, DNS is domain name system. Mostly when our computer is in network, so it is using IP to communicate between each other. Thus, so to send a packet to another computer, a computer requires to know the IP address. So, as a computer perspective, using IP address is simple, but for as a human or as a user, when we want to communicate with other computers, so it is difficult to remember the IP. So we will access the computer by using its name or domain name. So DNS allow us to use the name to identify a computer. At the same time, it gives us the IP address of that computer, which entered the name entered by the user. Then how DNS server will work? Let's see a simple query. A client requests that a query www.linuxwork.com. So the DNS server will reply with the IP address of that particular domain linuxwork.com. The next, what is DNS name? So DNS name is just a fully qualified domain name, which is an FQDN. Suppose like there is a domain name called mail.yahoo.com. So in this particular FQDN, the yahoo.com is the domain name, whereas the mail is the subdomain name. Then DNS server can hold all the names and IP address on the internet. As we know that there are various IP and names. So for a particular DNS server, it is not that it can hold all the IP and mapping of IP and names. So it will contact the next DNS server for the particular domain entry. So there are DNS hierarchy. So the hierarchy is like that: top level domain, root level, then top level, then second level domain, subdomain, and host. So what is root level? So the root level DNS server are the servers from which we have to start our DNS query. Suppose on the Google web browser we have write some URL like facebook.com. So the first query which will go to a server, that server is called DNS root server. So the root name server is very important because they are the first steps for resolving the domain name. These server contain the list of top level domains. So what is top level domain? So top level domains are typically consist of three letter, which indicates a country or a region or an organization using this domain. Like .com, which is represent a commercial business. .org, which is represent a non-profit organization. .gov for the government organization. Like in India, we are using .in, .jp for Japan, .uk. So these are the top level domains. So the entry of these top level domains are saved on that root level name servers. Then what is second level domain name? So the second level domain name are the variable length which are registered by an organization or a individual. Like the domain name is www.google.com. So the .com one is the top level domain, and whereas the Google is an organization which have registered this domain. So this is the second level domain, which is Google. So next one is the subdomain. Subdomain is the part of the main domain. Suppose we have a domain called storage.ourwebsite.com. So this store is the second subdomain. Suppose we have purchased a domain yourwebsite.com. So we have used this domain for our various purpose, like we have a store. So for store, we are using store.ourwebsite.com. We have some other showrooms or something, so we can use showroom.yourwebsite.com. So we can purchase a particular domain, and using that subdomains we can create multiple we can direct it to multiple website or multiple web servers. So suppose these are the two domain like one.example.com and two.example.com. Here both the domain are the subdomain of main domain, which is called example.com, whereas the example.com is also the subdomain of the particular .com top level domain. Then what is DNS lookup? So there are two types of DNS lookup, basically forward DNS lookup and reverse DNS lookup. So what is forward DNS lookup? So when we have just enter a domain name and DNS server give us the IP for the particular domain name, so this search is called forward DNS lookup. Whereas the reverse DNS lookup is like that. We have given the IP to a particular DNS server and want to know the domain name for that IP. So that query is called as a reverse DNS lookup. So let's see the example. There is a system query that who is www.yahoo.com to the DNS server. So DNS server replies the yahoo.com with an IP. Same as the in reverse lookup query, we ask to the DNS server who is 192.168.80.6. So it should reply with the domain name. So it reply that 192.168.80.6 is www.yahoo.com. So these are the two lookups types which DNS basically using. Then queries. So DNS supported two types of queries, recursive query and iterative query. So recursive query is like that a DNS client provides a host name and DNS resolver must provide an answer. It responds either the relevant record or it just, if the record is not found in its database, so it just send the error message that it can't find it. Then other one is called iterative. So in iterative DNS query, DNS client provides the host name to a DNS resolver and it returns the best answer. The best answer in the sense, if the DNS server has the partial answer, so it will send partial answer to the DNS client. Suppose that we have queried it like where is www.sunya.com, is there is entry for that in that DNS resolver. So in that DNS server, maybe the entry of sonia.com is not there, but it has the entry of com server. So it will send the IP of that com server and tell the DNS resolver that the sonia.com is rely in the com.dns. So you can query to the com.dns and check whether sonia.com is available or not. So recursive query, simply it's just ask the DNS server about the query. The DNS server is just reply, either it gives the IP or it just send a error message. Then iterative query. Iterative query indicates that the server will accept the referrals to the another server. Suppose there are 4 DNS server and our DNS resolver, we have sent a request to our DNS resolver. So the DNS resolver will go to the query to the root domain, the root level server, where it will send the reference to the another top level domain like www.linuxware.com ends with the level of com. So the DNS root server returns the referral of the com server that hosted on the com zone. So it works like that. The client request about the same domain. The DNS server send that request to the root server, that is if you have the linuxware.com. So the server replies that the com is dedicated to the com server and send the IP of the com server to our DNS server. So it will query the same to the com server, which give it to the reply that linux.com is dedicated to the linux.com server. Then it asks to the linux.com server that you have this www.linux.com. So it will reply with the IP. So our DNS server get this IP. So it will store this IP in its DNS server cache for future use, and then it replied to the client that the particular domain name has this IP. Yeah. So the next step we will do is the installation of DNS. So there are in today's video I will show the two steps, two other method for DNS installation. The one is using the bind, and other one is by using the DNS mask queue. So the bind is the most popular one for DNS, for configuring the DNS server. So we will using the bind packages for configuring the DNS. So let's start that. First we have to install the DNS package. So we need to install the DNS with all dependency. The bind package we need to install we need to install in our system. So I have a machine. So in this machine, first I will install the bind package and its dependencies. Yeah, so we have installed the packages. The next step is the assign to the FQDN for the server. So we have to do this host name file. We have to add the DNS server host name. So I have already done this entry and reboot the server. So my server host name is now dns1.linuxwork.com. The next step is configure the host file. So we have to make an entry in vi/etc host about our DNS server. So let's do this. So the IP of this node is 192.168.209.168, and then FQDN. The other next step is configure the /etc/resolve.com. So why we are doing the entry in /etc.resolve.com? Because our DNS entry is in that /etc.resolve.com file. So ei/etc resolve.com. So here you see there is one entry already. There is one entry name server and this IP. So this IP is my VM DNS IP. So I will add one more DNS server IP. 192.168.209.168. This is the DNS of this particular machine on which we are configuring the DNS using bind packages. Next step is configure the name.conf file. Yeah. So in this file, we have to first edit this. The listen on port 53. The default port for DNS is 53. So currently it is listening on localhost. So we can add one more entry for my IP. We can comment out this IPv6. Then if I am using some different directory apart from that name or that configuration, so I can change here the directory name. So we can put this as it is. And query. So the allow query is that the DNS server which we have installed is resolve only the query of localhost. But we want to it resolve to query of any other node. So we just remove this localhost to any, and we will just save this file. Now, the next step is create zones. So in zones, as I discussed, that there is two types of lookups: forward lookup or reverse lookup. So there are two types of zone: forward zone or reverse zone. So we will create the file for forward zone. So in this file, we have to define the domain name. So zone, then the domain name. My domain name is linuxworld.com. If we are using some other domain like example.com or any other, so we can put here. IN is stand for internet. Then we have to define the type. There are primary DNS and secondary DNS. So the one which we are configuring is the primary DNS or the master DNS. So we have to define the type. So our type is master. Then we have to define the path of the database file. So the database file is for that particular zone is in var named linuxworld.com.db. Then we have to define that allow update. So if it is secondary server, so we have to define IP of that master server, but as it is master server, so we don't need any update, so we have just put none here. Similarly, like forward zone, we will create the reverse zone. Yeah, so the reverse lookup query is like that. We have to put we have to give the IP to the DNS server, and it will give us the domain. So same like this, we have to define the particular network. So we have to write this network in opposite direction, like 192.168.208.168 is our IP of our DNS server, or the domain name for which we have configured that server. So we have to write like this: 209.168.192, and this is the syntax for the writing. Then same, it is master. We have to define the DB file, then allow update none as it is a master server. Then we have to save this file. Then the next step is we have to create this DB file for both forward and reverse zone. Yeah, so in this file, we have to add the TTL. TTL is time to live that query. So TTL time is 1 day. Then we have to add the NS server, means the DNS server entry. So our FQDN for this particular server is dns1.linuxworld.com. Then we have to add our domain before that root, that linuxwork.com. Then there are some parameter like serial number, refresh, retry, expire, TTL. Then we have to define our name server. So just give the name server FQDN here. Then we have to give the IP address of that particular name server. So our name server is DNS, the host name for that particular is DNS1. So DNS1 A for the IP address. So the IP address is 192.168.206.168. Then we have now we can configure the record for this particular domain. So for A is A stand for record host name to IP address. So whenever we want to map the IP address and a host name, domain name, so we just use the A record. So I am using that WWIN for internet. It's type for IP address, then the IP address that for that particular domain. Then mail, same the IP address. Suppose we are using that IPv6, so instead of that single A, we will use that double A for the IPv6. Then CNAME record is why we are using CNAME record is we are binding the domain to another domain. Suppose that this is the domain www.linux.com, and I want to use this when I want that this domain will use ftp.linuxwork.com also. So whenever I am writing ftp.linuxwork.com, so it will resolve this IP, that 192.168.209.100, because for www we have defined this IP. So while binding two domain to a same IP, we are using CNAME record. So we just save this file. Same file we need to create for our reverse zone. So same in reverse zone, we have defined the TTL, then we have defined this name server, other parameters. Then we in our reverse zone, we have defined only the IP to the third subnet mask, third octet. The fourth octet we need to define here in reverse lookup. Like the IP is 168 and the PTR is for the pointer, so it will point to this server. Similarly, like this, when we are using 100, so 192.168.209.100, so when we are giving this IP 100, so it will point to the www.linuxwork.com. And when we are using 150 IP, so it will point mail.linuxwork.com. Let's save this file. Now we will check our configuration is correct or not. So we will use this command. So in this command, name check zone. So we have to define the zone file. So in our forward zone, I have defined zone as linuxwork.com, my domain name, and the related database file. So yeah, it is working fine. The syntax is good. And also we can check this serial number. The serial number, it is showing here, it should match to the DB1. Yeah, the serial number is 101 and it is showing, and the check command is also giving the serial number 101. So the context is good, though the forward zone is configured successfully. Similarly, we will do for that reverse zone. Same, the zone name which I have given in reverse.zone.com file and the database file name. The syntax is okay, and here it is giving the serial is 3. So we will check. Yeah, the serial here we given is 3. And whenever we there is one more thing, whenever we have update this record, suppose we have add one more record in this our DNS file, so we have to increase this serial number. Files are okay, everything is configured, just we need to now restart the named service. Named service is started. Yeah, it is working. Now for checking that DNS is working or not, we have some DNS tools. there is one console called DNS Management Console, which is an UI from where you can check, or there are some command line utilities like NS Lookup or dig. So by using this command line utility, we can check that DNS server is working as expected or not. So this is our DNS1 is our DNS server. So I will open one more client, DNS2. So in this client, I will make an entry of our DNS server. So now it will use the 160 the server with 168 IP as its DNS server. Let's do the dig command, dig www.linuxwork.com. So it should return the IP 100 for this linuxwork.com. It is telling that no reach. Let me ping the DNS server. Ping. Yeah, so its own no, it is not able. That's all. Sorry, here I have to put 109. Sorry. Here. Yeah, so it is giving the response www.linuxwork.com. Just a second. Oh, sorry. I just forgot to mention that we have to include this forward zone and reverse zone in this particular file. So we need to include we have to give name permission. Yeah, so now it is giving that www.linuxwork.com. The IP is 192.168.209.100. And if I will do mail.linuxwork.com, so it will give me the IP of that 50, that 192.168.209.50 and mail.linuxwork.com. Same we will do this from the other host, the DNS2. Yeah. So it is also giving the same result for linuxwork.com. It is 209.100, and for mail.com 150. Now we will do the reverse lookup, that we are giving the IP, it should give us the name. So for this, dig-x 192.168.209.100. So for 100, linuxwork.com it should give. Yeah. So for 100, it is giving the PTR value, this one, and it is showing me the name server dns1.linuxwork.com and the IP of that name server. The same for 150, it should work. Mail server it should given. So the mail.linuxwork.com and the IP is 150. Yeah. So another command is nslookup. So nslookup, suppose I have given the C name, which I returned in the forward zone. The C name is ftp.linuxwork.com. So it will return me the www.linuxwork.com IP with its name. So it is showing that the ftp linuxwork.com is a canonical name, which is refers to the www.linuxwork.com, and it is giving me the server IP, the address, and the here is the server DNS server IP. Same reverse lookup we can do from this. So it will just directly give me the domain name in nx lookup command. So this is the main configuration using bind package. Here we are creating the zones. So we can create the multiple forward zone for our different zone, different domain name, and say similarly like forward zone, we will create the reverse zone, and we can create multiple entry in our that DB file. So if the number of IP for that particular domain have various mapping, so we can just in this zone file, we can create the multiple entries for this particular domain linuxwork.com. Suppose if we have some another domain example.com, so we have to create another zone for this particular domain name, and we have to create the database different database file, and then we can create the multiple entries for that particular domain. So this is all for that bind one. So we can move towards slides. So the next, we are using DNS mask queue for configuring DNS. So the demo I have showed that using bind is popularly used. DNS mask queue is a lightweight package for DNS. So in this DNS mask queue, we don't have to create that forward zone or reverse zone, because it mostly used for small network. So by using our host file only, it will create a DNS and help us to resolve a small network. So let's do for the DNS mask queue. So first we need to install the DNS mask queue package. So I will use this time this DNS2 server. it will throw an error because in resolve.con I have given the IP of my DNS address. So let me first remove that entry. Yeah, the package is installed. So the next step is we have to configure the DNS mask file. dnsmasq.conf is the main configuration file for DNS mask. So we have just changed the port. We'll use 5053. We have to uncomment the few lines like this. Strict order, or we can create a new file with, by placing this parameter on that particular file and resolve, and then strict order, then expand host. I think expand host is not there in this newer version, so let it be. The next one is to configure the /etc host file. As I told that in DNS mask we are not configuring any forward zone or reverse zone. We have just put our entries in /etc host file, and it will start working as like a DNS server. So in /etc host file, I will create some entries. 15 w dot linux.com mail dot I will updated the host entry. The next step is just we need to restart the DNS mask service. And check the status. It is running on. And it is DNS MaskQ is also using the name server, the public name server, public DNS. So the entry in this result.com is still using that 192.168.0.9, which is the public server for my particular VM. Now, when I will go to my next node in its result.com, I will add the entry of that DNS MaskQ server IP. So its IP is 69. So I have added this name server. Now let's take www.linux.com. Yeah, so it is giving the IP 15. So let me add this host file. For linux.com, it is 15. Let's do ns lookup for mail.yahoo.com. So 209.85. Yeah, so I have put it the IP 209.85. Now we will do the reverse lookup for this particular IP. So it should, yeah, so it is giving me the domain name store.ourwebsite.com. Yeah, so for configuring the DNS for a small setup, so we can use DNS MaskQ. And for a big organization where there are various entry and other stuff, so we can use that bind, which is the pure DNS one. So yeah. Anything else? Yeah, then thank you. We can